Okay, so
Let me make you the.
today I'm gonna just start talking, and I want today's presentation to be less presentation-like and more interactive because it's very different. It's very different from how I was doing the other presentations because it's a very kind of personal thing, and I'll tell you why in a bit. And it's also something that's evolving for me, less so than, a lot of, I mean, of course, how we practice behavior consultation evolves all the time, but uh, where in cases where kids and dogs are involved, it's, a very, it's more difficult, and it's less kind of concrete in my mind. So like I'm talking to you guys about this topic from my point of view, and then I want your points of view, points of view too. So feel free to unmute yourself as long as you don't have like Gus in the background, and let's chat about kids and dogs. So I'm gonna try to share my screen. Hopefully I have the screen sharing abilities. Where's it? There it is. And I think it's this. Okay. Here we go. Like, okay. So, 1 second. I'm gonna move all these things around here. Present. Every time I try to press the present button, it goes away. Ta-da! Okay. So I never do this, but today I'm gonna be presenting a case study for you and really focusing on the case study about kids and dogs. And this is a case that really changed how I felt about cases that involve children with animals. And I'm not sure how you guys feel about cases with children, since I know that, you guys, some of you see cases, or what you think about kids and dogs together. But I was trained on how to handle cases with kids, and I had a way of doing it. I know a lot of trainers that kind of head for the hills as soon as they hear that there's a child involved, especially if there's some kind of conflict. And I mean, I didn't exactly head for the hills, but I realize now that that my approach needed a lot of refining. So, I mean, I created this presentation with the goals in mind of helping behavior consultants have more tools to encourage better relationships between kids and their dogs. And, I mean, part of what goes into that is, how you pick a dog and how you manage these animals' behaviors and how you train them. But I mean, it's really deeper than that. My goals are to maybe encourage you all to think about how you approach these cases if you haven't already. Like, has anybody seen a case with kids and dogs before? No? Suzanne, thinking about something?
Yes, I have. I guess I've been asked for advice, opposed to really doing a case, but I have been asked advice for a couple of cases.
Yeah. Did you have any feelings about it, regarding the fact that it involved kids? Like, did you think, oh,
Yes,
it,
I did. I guess for me, because so it was a couple of BART cases, to be honest, and my recommendation was that they actually engaged a trainer, opposed to just me giving them some advice, because I felt that if it goes wrong with a kid, the kid can get hurt badly,
yeah.
which does worry me.
Yeah. And that's true. I think that that's something that alarms a lot of trainers And that's probably why even before I was a mom, but certainly after I became a mom, a lot of people really kind of shifted those cases to me like, oh, here, you know about kids, here you go. um, but, I'm not a, a child psychology expert. I'm not even a hobbyist, and I do, and, I'm not, I was a high school teacher, I taught kids as young as 10, but I don't think that really helped me. And, you know, I, I don't know a lot about kids. I'm a parent though, and so now I have some more tools because of that parenthood. But, I understand why a lot of trainers shifted those cases over to me because they wouldn't even touch them. Like they wouldn't look at them at all. I said, I don't even know about kids. Here you go. Or call Melissa. She knows about kids. um, so I guess like maybe this goals page is wrong. More than anything, I think it's important to kind of consider, uh, reconsider your approach to cases with kids. Aside from the fact that yes, there's liability involved, and in your private business, you should take out liability insurance. um, but and also, it's scarier because for some reason it's scarier for us because kids seem so much less controllable. So just think about it, and maybe all this stuff, was natural for you, but for me, it didn't come very naturally. Like I was never kind of a kid fan. I never, didn't really want kids kind of growing up. And then later just decided to, with careful consideration, and I made the decision and I had kids pretty old. Like I was pretty old mom. Like I was, almost 40. I think I had my second when I was after I was 40. So, okay, so let's talk about this case study that rocked my world. Okay, so it was about a dog, and the dog was this cute little fluffy dog, and her name was Trista. She was like maybe about a year old, and she got dumped at Friends for Life, and she had a rough past, and we'll go over that. And then also Griffin. And Griffin is also a very particular specimen. So let's talk about their case history. So Griffin was in the household first. He was about 2.5 years old, and since he was born, he was like, there's this term that moms or parents use called the high needs. So it's a thing. Who knows what it really is? It could be a label for a collection of behaviors that are either due to some diagnoses, or it's just something that I would say as Griffin's mom was part of his high needsness was that he had he was predisposed to lots of emotional outbursts for very small, like relatively small reasons, especially when I got together with other moms and saw their other kids. Like we would have, mom get-togethers, and people would lay their babies all like on the floor, like on a blanket, and they would go have coffee and stuff. But I could never do that. I could never just put Griffin down and go and socialize with the other moms. He was really tough, and he had to be on me all the time. So if you were at the shelter, at the shelter at the time I worked, but I was encouraged to bring Griffey with me because oftentimes I had to be home alone with my husband working, and nobody wanted to hold Griffey when I was busy doing consults. So initially, our operations manager said that I could bring him, and our receptionist would hold him. At the time, our receptionist was Gabby, who she moved up the chain and she became our adoptions manager. I don't know if any of you knew her before, but she would often recount how hard it was to do that job. Like I would be in my consult and I would hear Griffin screaming and in the entire shelter, and all the like staff and volunteers were like passing him around, you know, to try and calm him down. He was a really tough kid. And at this age, I had my second baby, and that was very, very tough for Griffin. So with dogs, he was pretty good. He was good because he wasn't affectionate with dogs. Like he wasn't interested in that. So that was nice because we fostered a lot of dogs who had behavior issues, like maybe they were reactive to strangers, or mostly reactive to all sorts of things, or, you know, they had their various difficulties, some handling issues and so on. But Griff was good with them, and we had our way of introducing him to them, and he never had any issues. So then we had our second child, and he had really big issues with the baby. So he, you know, I mean, I think that at the time I was too busy kind of suffering from my own difficulties in handling having this child and then having the baby, and, you know, and then having them compete against each other. Well, the baby wasn't competing, but Riffy certainly was. It was tough. And so that's when Trista came into our lives. I still had my little bitty baby, and I got a call saying that there was a dog that couldn't be touched, and she basically was dumped at the shelter. She was in the middle of giving birth, so she had her two puppies when she was dumped, and then she was dumped outside, and people chased her all around, and eventually Celise was able to pick her up somehow. She's a very feisty young lady, and brought her into the shelter, where she proceeded to have more babies. So she was, you know, in the middle of having babies, and she had more babies after they caught her. She was, you know, I got the call because they couldn't touch her and they couldn't move her from her space. So I had to come in every day to get her out and take her out so that her space could be cleaned. When people did try to kind of look at her, or, you know, clean her space or check on the babies or whatever, she would be extremely aggressive towards them. And she actually, you know, she would try to bite, and she did bite people. She delivered level 3 bites, and one through a shoe. And so, you know, I mean, you can imagine how bad that bite would have been if she didn't have a shoe on. And after she was at the shelter for a bit, she eventually went to foster with somebody who had other dogs, but then she came down with parvo, so she needed to be separated from her puppies, and she had to be separated from the foster's dogs. So that's how I ended up with her, because I didn't have a foster at that time. And so even though I had my baby and Griffin, I convinced Matt to take this parvo surviving crazy scared dog that I couldn't touch her for a week of working with her one-on-one. And so here's a picture of me like working on her at the shelter and finally able to touch her. But you can see how scared she is, right? Like, even though she's very socially interested in me, you can see, you know, by her posture that she's really scared. Her tail should be like curly, and it's just hanging there. So that's the curly dog's tail tuck. So she's got her tucked tail, and her ears are, her lips are drawn back, and she's got, if you can see it, but I can't zoom in, but she's like here. And then here she is with all of her babies. She was such a great mom. She turned out to be really, really affectionate. So affection was her number one. And she was so babies of all kinds. Like she loved babies. So I don't know if you can see, but here's a picture of Mama with my baby Perry at the time. She loved him. She was, if she could choose a place to be, she would be near Perry all the time. Oh, and she also loved puppy babies. So she used to come to the shelter and socialize orphan baby puppies. Oh, this is a funny picture. So if you look, there's this little baby, and then in the background, here's Mama Dog. And then PC posted it with the caption, Mama Dog just is always watching, always, which is true. She's very vigilant, and she would come in, and her duty, I guess, was to watch over these puppies. And we couldn't, even my husband, if my husband came in and she loved him, she wouldn't let him come near the babies. So, and then here she is sharing a chew toy with Perry. So she was obsessed with Perry. So I don't know if you can see where this is going, but she loved babies, particularly Perry. And then Griffin really hated Perry, like hated him with a passion. And so some other things about the background were that, my husband and I were pretty experienced with special behavior dogs, and both of us are pretty good at reading dog body language. We were generally pretty overwhelmed. Like Griffey was very hard. Like that, it changed how I felt about parenthood, having Griffey. And I was often alone because Matt had to work. He worked 2 jobs, and he was often gone for 24 hours at a time. We lived in an apartment together. One thing that I was able to do, I have to say, when I say that I was overwhelmed, I remember that I was lucky to take a shower and then soak my body. Usually I was ran in the shower, wet myself with water, and then I had to go back and take care of Griffey because he was so needy. That I was like, wow, I shampooed my hair today, or wash dishes today. It's tough. But I was able to do fitness. I was a fitness addict at that time. Running dog and the kids, maybe 5 miles a day or so. Mama Dog often went to the dog park, and she really enjoyed playing with other dogs. Mama Dog volunteered at the shelter, and she really loved that too. We did a lot of behavior modification because she was reactive to people and dogs on walks. And she had 3 meals a day, and she was trained, for those meals. So, she had pretty good enrichment. And some signs of that trouble was brewing were that at night, Griffey would attack me, and baby Perry in bed. It was so horrible. He would lay awake at night, and he would come into our bed and kick us and bite us, and it was pretty terrible. And Mama Dog was there. So that was pretty rough. And also Mama Dog started guarding her food against Griffey only. So I should have thought about that, oh, there's something wrong here. And then also Griffey has this kind of pressure-seeking behavior where I don't want to say if, but when something was happening that might be different. So I'll tell you some antecedents. Before I had Perry, I used to run a lot of races. And when I was pregnant, I also ran races. And we traveled to Surfside to do a race, and we were staying in a hotel, and we didn't often stay in hotels. And I don't know why, but whenever there's some change in the environment, Griffin would press into, he was doing this all night. He would roll and press into me on the bed, because we were all sleeping in a king-sized hotel bed. He was rolling into me call this race in the morning, and I wasn't sure. And he would do that all the time. Um, so the other antecedent, when I was spending time with Perry, like if I was feeding Perry, and or playing with Perry, never really got to do, but looking at Perry, then he would start doing this pressure seeking. So like just coming in and like, running into me, or like maybe hitting. He was doing a bit of hitting. He was biting. So anyway, he was doing that, and he started to do it to Mama Dog. So whenever we were busy with Perry. So then, I mean, you don't, I like, and you sometimes you'll have these little problems. Kids there, it kind of disturbs on a day-to-day basis, but they don't fix something really terrible happens. So Griffey got bitten. Griffey was finally got bitten by Mama Dog. I was looking at my old text to my friends about the incident, and I wrote to my friends that Griffey was being an ass. And what he was doing was and she jumped up and she bit him in the face. And I was, like all moms, for any reason, especially when the kids are small, I was just beside myself. I was like shaking, and it was rough. And Matt was like, "Oh, we can't keep Mama Dog." It was a rough situation. And he had one pretty deep puncture under his eye, and then one level 3 puncture, like kind of where her teeth, where her jaws were. She only bit him the one time. And so basically, so that's so that's where we were at that time. And I mean, I have to say that we've grown past that. Obviously, we still have Mama Dog, and we still have Griffin. And but it changed a lot about what I thought about these cases. So it's not that what I was doing before was wrong. So I'm just gonna kind of go over classically what people teach about getting kids used to dogs and having a harmonious household with dogs. Do you guys know this book? This Tails Are Not for Pulling? It's just, one of a series of books about how kids should handle dogs. So that's one of the things that we encourage parents to do is, read a lot of books about how to behave around dogs and talk to kids about, what dogs like, and, how to read dog body language and so on. So that's kind of the classic, one of the classic approaches. Also like how to pick dogs, and how to, prevent how to prevent kids and dogs from getting together during troublesome times, and how to get dogs to feel more comfortable with kids' bad behaviors. And, those are really typical things. So I'm gonna kind of go over these things more in depth. I wanted to involve you guys in talking about these things, so you can feel free to kind of contribute, your thoughts or anything I might have been missing about how people are typically taught to deal with dogs and kids. And also coming from the background of not being a parent. Like, think about it. Like, how many dog trainers do you know actually have children? Right? Do you know any like really good dog trainers that have children? Anybody? Or like famous dog trainers, yes. I know. I don't know a lot of famous dog trainers. I know like I know very few good dog trainers with kids. Not that, I mean, I know like not so many super good dog trainers, but I also know a very small percentage of those who have kids. And it's always like the child is always this, an object of curiosity because, when you get together with your trainer friends and one of them has a child and you're like, are you training the child? And all that, it's always like that. But so it's so unusual so that the people who are giving this advice actually live it. Okay, so let's talk about how we encourage the best selection of a dog. So what do you say about, whether adopters should pick puppies or adults? Or what do you think?
I guess there's always the desire to say puppy so that they grow up together,
Mm-hmm.
and that the puppy's in the socialization phase and they can be maybe conditioned to being around kids just like they can be socialized with puppies.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's not always going to work out anyway, just depending on the personality of the puppy you get or the socialization of the puppy so far. Not every puppy who grows up with a kid is going to end up liking the kid. And then an adult dog might have had a good past with children or might have had a pretty bad past with children, and you don't
Right.
know. So I guess, I don't know, I would say puppy, but it doesn't always work that way either.
Yeah, and I guess it's like an interesting one as well because I know, um, fostering a dog like Sammy, who obviously is very scared of like a lot of people. But actually, when he was around like kind of calm, quiet kids, he was pretty good with small children. I guess maybe they weren't so scary for him. But
Mm-hmm. Sure, like every dog's an individual. So when you say,
that,
yeah, like a puppy is more likely to be open to having kids. I mean, you can just as well traumatize a puppy too with your children.
Right.
And then,
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, it still might not go well.
yeah,
yeah.
actually, I can think of a bunch of cases that I've seen where the puppy grew up with kids and then like grew up to bite them because the kids weren't listening to
Yeah.
the puppy. Um,
And they can be weird puppies. So one of ours.
Right. I mean, that's what I always think of is like all the weird puppies we've had at our shelter that like just because they were in that socialization period doesn't mean it was going to work out.
Yeah, exactly. I usually like to recommend that parents go for dogs who are adults and at least 2 years of age, because then you kind of what you see is what you get. Like you're not likely to see a lot of behavior issues crop up suddenly after that. And I mean, so like between adult and puppy, I'm usually more likely to recommend adult. Also, I mean, puppies are tough. They're tough, and people, how do I stop my Facebook from sending me stuff? Can you see it when my Facebook sends me stuff?
Yeah.
Because I want to have my Facebook open so I can show you some videos. So if you guys know how to turn that off.
I don't know how.
Now it's even worse because before it was making sounds and now it's worse. Anyway, that's fine. I think it's fine unless somebody knows how to fix it. So yeah, so I'm always leaning towards an adult, and that pretty much hasn't changed with me in a while. Like I've never been one to recommend a puppy because of, puppies are not necessarily more or less likely to bond with a family. And if you do choose a puppy, I always recommend getting to know the puppy's parents if possible, especially if people are purchasing from a breeder, to get to know the parents and handle the parents. Like don't just lay eyes on the parents, but like handle them and talk to the breeder about how the parent behaves in different situations, like around children, around strangers, and so on. And if you cannot know the parents of the puppy, at least make sure that that puppy has been properly socialized. So not just exposed to kids, but, you know, like if I adopted a puppy from Friends for Life, I would kind of check in with the foster. Like I would want to know who the foster was, and I would want a foster who was, you know, going down a list for socialization and um, and responsibly, you know, exposing the puppy. Because, you know, by the time you do take home the puppy, a lot of that opportunity for socialization has already passed. So you want to make sure that the people who have the puppy at that time are doing what they can to expose them at an appropriate level of intensity. So if you do purchase a dog, or if you're looking for a particular breed, this is, you know, this is a huge deal for me working in the shelter, because especially if you look online and people are looking for the best dog for their kids, you know, it's always like, which breed is better for kids? And or you'll, you know, when you work in a shelter, people always want to know what breed is this dog, because, you know, chow chows are not good with kids, or, you know, and the problem is that while some breeds of dog are bred for certain behaviors, most of the dogs that are available to the public as pets are not. They're just bred for a look. So the problem is you get a wide variety of behaviors. So like where labs, you know, initially were bred to have a soft mouth and to be able to work closely with people and to be very tolerant. I think that the average pet lab that's out there in the world doesn't follow that breed standard for behavior. And I mean, I can think of lots of labs, purebred and mixed breed, who have had issues with children, despite the fact, you know, that that's one of the, you know, breeds that's recommended for children.
I think I read a statistic somewhere actually, Melissa, that said labs are one of the highest, like, sorry, I'm not saying this correctly, have the like the highest number of bite incidents with children. And I think it's because people do buy labs for children and then are not responsible with the children.
Right. Yeah. And I think that if that's, you know, the case, then I can imagine that's the reason why, because a lot of people, when they don't know that much about dogs, they tend to rely on this breed standard because it's easy, right? It's like, I don't know, it's like if you like tart apples, you'll buy this kind of apple. And if you like, you know, if you like apples that have more of a mealy texture, you'll buy a different kind of apple. And so it's so easy for people to follow that, you know, breed standard. But the problem is that it becomes like this. It becomes everything to the caregiver or to the adopter, you know, who they're like, oh well, you know, this is a lab, so they're going to behave this way, and they're going to have all these expectations, and they're not going to think so much about selecting the individual for their particular situation. So that kind of goes on to this, you know, history and what the behavior of the dog is like now. So, you know, of course, when you're getting an adult dog, you'll want to know, you know, do they have you know, favorable history with children? And that's going to trump their breed standard is, obviously. You know, have they been with children of, you know, whatever age, you know, that you're looking for, you know, like, so if you have a toddler, what a dog did around teenagers isn't going to be so helpful. And so for me, the number one thing when people adopt an adult dog or a puppy is, you know, how much what is the nature of the social interest that this dog has in children. So I kind of wrote down here the process by which I've introduced dogs to kids. And whenever families with kids come to the shelter and, you know, I'm lucky enough to help them out, I really love doing this exercise where, you know, you have the kids in an area like the living room. So not like a big, huge outdoor space, but you're in the living room. It's a good sized space and relatively distraction free. And the kids are like, especially the smaller ones who are not able to follow instructions, are going to be supervised by one adult each. So you're not going to have like one parent with 5 kids. If it's impossible for one adult to watch each, you know, child who's not able to follow instructions, then you'll have to break it up, like, and do, you know, some kids first and then the next set of kids after. And then you're going to tell the kids not to interact. So don't look at the dogs or touch them or talk to them as much as possible. And you laugh, but actually it's, you know, I don't know, kids are usually successful at doing this. And I put this picture here because the lady is holding on to the baby and around the dog. So that's usually what I ask people to do, because then you're like able to physically prevent the child from reaching out to the dog. I'm not sure how happy this dog is. Another lab. And then once everybody's settled and knows what the instructions are, then the dog comes in and you just kind of let the dog have a lot of leeway. You got the dog on the leash, but you kind of let them do what they want, and you're watching them to see how interested they are in kids, because the amount of pro-social interest is related to the safety of the dog around kids. Now, it's not going to rule out all, you know, potentially dangerous behaviors, but it's a start, and it's a big start. Like, I wouldn't let a dog go home with a family with kids if the dog was not interested in the kids. Like, that's a hard and fast rule at the shelter. If the dog comes in and is not, like, you know, liking those kids at all, not even showing any signs that they recognize those children as, you know, potential, like I say, conspecific. So conspecific is, do you guys know what that word means? Anybody can tell me their definition? So a conspecific is an animal who is in the same species as, you know, the dog. So like a conspecific of a dog is another dog. But I also use the word, and I've heard it used before, to mean another living being that can interact socially with that animal. So, you know, like you could say that humans can be treated as conspecifics of dogs. Like, there's no doubt that dogs interact with us socially, and we interact socially with the dog. So when I say that the dog treats the child like a conspecific, it's just my shorthanded way of saying that the dog is like socially interested and believes that that child is another, like, I can't say what the dog believes, but, you know, they're acting like they believe that that child is able to do that social give and take. So that's it's important to look for that, you know, and we wouldn't send a dog home who wasn't showing any social interest in the kids, just because it increases the chance that the dog will injure the child. And after, you know, we kind of observe just what the dog does when the kids don't do anything, then we have each kid one at a time, you know, as the dog approaches them, you know, maybe toss a toy for the dog, or maybe pet the dog like under the chin, just really briefly, and we kind of observe what the dog does. We might have the child like start to move a little bit, like stand up, or, you know, with the supervising adult attached. And gradually we'd allow the kids to become more and more natural around the dogs, like start running around and like, scream and do all those things that kids do. Because we want to see what they're going to do, how the dog is going to respond to those stimuli. Do you guys have questions about that? Or, does it seem, is there something that you would add to that?
I think it makes sense to me. I guess one question I did have is, do you have any thoughts about actual age of children, or are you?
Yeah, I didn't want to mention the age because sometimes kids who are older are less able to handle instruction than kids that are younger. So I just wanted to kind of, I wanted to, you know, I didn't want that to be the differentiating factor in how we handle things, like what their age is, or how big they were, but more like how capable they were of just. For example, Griffey was like an ace. I could just say, that was one really good thing about Griffin, was that he was really good at following instructions. I could say even when he was 2.5, I could just say, just sit there, don't touch the dog. Or we had a dog at the shelter who had a long history of reactivity, but she couldn't show. And so her name was Princess. She was with us for ages. And when I introduced her to Griffey, I just told him, and he was like, I don't know, 1.5 years, maybe almost 2. Maybe 1.5 years. He was walking, but I just told him to just walk on in front of her, and then I had her follow him. But he was so good, like he wouldn't turn around and talk to her. So he was quite small. So I think that it's important to kind of gauge the ability of the kids. Like you can talk to the parents beforehand. You can, use your best judgment with kids. And if kids are aliens to you, then that's a little tougher. But I would definitely talk to the parents in a frank way, or like even try to talk to them if you can, with one of them watching. If you have 2 adults, you could have one of them talking to you away from the kids too. Because I know, like, I wouldn't want to say, I wouldn't want to say a lot of the things that I feel about Griffey with Griffey there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, of course kids are going to do different things. Like toddlers are more likely to move in a wobbly way, but there's a lot of older kids that also will do that too. So what about you, Katie? You're very kid experienced.
Oops, I pressed the wrong button. Yeah, I think that it really just, I agree with you. Like, it does depend on the kids. Some kids are just going to be like, like they just have more like energetic personalities, and any movement they make is going to be sort of startling. And so I think it just kind of, I don't know. I always observe kids, and I feel like I kind of make a judgment pretty quickly on like how they're going to act around a dog, whether I'm right or not. And so I kind of can just, usually when I do adoption interviews with parents and the kids are there, I can kind of say, yeah, you don't want that dog, or like, I don't think that's going to work out, but we could try like something else, just based on how the kids behave while the interview is happening. Because if they can't, like sometimes they can't sit still during the interview, or they're constantly interrupting, or they just have to be up and moving around. And then I can kind of see how a meet and greet with a dog would go.
Yeah.
Based on like the parents trying to say, sit down, and the kid just like not, being there at all.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you can get a lot of information from those types of situations. So stuff that we don't have actually as a behavior team before the people come in to meet a dog. I do think it's a good idea to have a conversation with parents about like how kids are at home, because I know that if I was in that situation with Griffin now, and also when he was a small child, there's no way that he would have behaved like in a natural way in an interview session. In the interview session, he probably would have been pretty, I don't know, like he would have been like a pale version of himself. He would have just sat there and not been crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess the other challenge is, like, if you have kids, then you're most likely to have other kids come into the house. So just because
Right.
your kids behave a certain way, the other kid, the other kids coming into the house is
Yeah,
quite,
in general.
Right.
Yeah,
yeah.
true.
Yeah.
That's definitely something to keep in mind too.
I
Mm,
always also kind of look at how the parents think of the kids,
yeah.
because some parents are, or they talk about their kids as if, they're perfect, because they want us to think that their kids are perfect and that they're good parents,
Yeah,
which, like, I
it's
deal with
like
this a lot in
Facebook.
teaching too. But then it's like, okay, but if you're not being honest with me about how your kid's going to act around a dog, or how you would handle your kid acting a certain way around a dog, then I'm probably going to be skeptical about letting you take home a dog,
Mm,
because
Right.
I don't feel like you're being very honest about, like, how you would handle the situation, or you're just telling me what I want to hear about how you would handle the situation.
Gosh.
Like, sometimes I feel like the parents are more of the problem.
But how can you tell though? Like, I mean, I'm
Oh,
not, I wouldn't feel very secure in my ability to tell
that's
whether the
true.
parent truly
I
feels
think
like
that
their
I'm
kids
just very
are
skeptical of people, maybe.
skeptical.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, sure.
But
I
yeah, I
mean,
think those are my bigger worries, though. I think is, like, that the meet and greet situation maybe isn't always as authentic as, like, what the home life is.
mm-hmm, sure.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. It's like a test, right? And they're going to do
yeah,
whatever they can to pass the test.
exactly. Which is why I
Okay.
don't really do adoption interviews anymore, because I don't feel like I'm very fair.
Aw, I bet you're amazing at them.
No, like, I really think I'm just too harsh. Like, I think I'm just too mean to people.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could see that happening, especially what you see when you work with dogs all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
So here's some more, kind of classic, advice that trainers give to people is, how to manage, the exposure of the dog to kids. And it's not bad information, just practice confining dogs and, train them, or have a kid-free area where the dog can be, and that's going to be the place where the dog eats and, chews stuff. It's going to be, in that kid-free area. Not have like toys lying around. Good luck with that. But these are things that I said to people too. Um, and supervise, supervise, supervise. Like you see that all the time on articles about dogs and kids. It's not that I disagree with that. It's that I think it's a very, like, now I think it's a very cavalier thing to say to parents with kids. Although, there's a lot of other problems too with just saying to supervise them. But yeah, so basically you can't go to the bathroom, because if you went to the bathroom, you'd have to, like, put your kids somewhere and put your dog somewhere. If it's a baby, you can't leave your baby alone, because, everyone tells you that your baby might die any moment. When you're a mom, a new mom, and you're, reading up on momming on on Google, you can't, like, leave your baby anywhere, because they're gonna roll off the table and fall to their death or whatever. Okay. So also, what a typical thing that people tell people is to, practice exercises to get dogs used to rude kid behaviors, and also stuff that I am on board with. And so one of the exercises that I practice with my kids, with my dogs, is something called, it's how to, explaining how to play Go Wild and Freeze. I don't know what happened to the rest of the text, but so here, I practiced it on video yesterday, and I mean, I can say that I had more outtakes than usable video because of my kids' antics. Because because they saw that I set up the tripod. I'm terrible about videoing stuff that I'm actually doing, even though I ask people to do it. Or at the shelter, it's really easy, but at home with kids, basically what you get is a lot of like kids like wiggling their butts at the video, at the camera, and just being rude to the camera. So, that I would say like 90% of the video I took was just outtakes. But here's Griffey explaining how to play Go Wild and Freeze. Can you hear? So I don't know if you heard that, but he said, when she says go wild, you go wild. And when she says, she meaning me, she says freeze, you freeze. And then you give the dog a treat. Okay, so I had the kids do this with the dogs yesterday, but I was the one who messed up though. I didn't press record, so oh well, that's for another time. But here's actually a pretty good video about how to do Go Wild and Freeze. So we'll just watch it super quick. I think it's very short. I just want to fast forward so that you don't have to hear all the music. So this is a little bit different. So this is how I used to do it, or how I was taught to do it, and I do it a little bit differently now. So this exercise assumes that your dog likes it when you get all riled up, and so I don't think it's a good idea to make that assumption. And the other thing is that there's that kind of operant, it's more like on an operant level, but really we want to have the dogs feel good. We want to change any potential unpleasant feelings that dogs have about sudden movements, especially in kids. So basically instead, I have the kids go wild and for a very short time before I tell them to freeze. And then the kids just immediately hand over a treat. So their crazy movements will predict something good. And, I coach them specifically on what parts of their bodies I want them to move. So it might start with just, a little bit of arm waving, and then work its way up to like jumping and spinning and running from place to place near the dog. So I know you probably want to see a video of that, but I just I'll have to do it at home again. And it was just too crazy yesterday. So do you have questions about that, or do you have any thoughts about that? So this is just one exercise that, oh, here's some chats. Like I keep thinking that I have to look at the chats. Can somebody be in charge of the chats so that, you know, if you guys have questions that you're asking during the talk, I want to answer them. But so some other things are just handling exercises, like, you know, touching the dog and giving them a treat. So counter conditioning, handling. Let's see, I mean, having dogs follow kids is a good way to counter condition movement. So there's a bunch of things I can, and later on we'll talk about more activities that are, you know, less classic, less traditional ways of coaching families with kids. Okay. What's the matter? Okay. And then I was also talking about teaching empathy. So probably everybody's seen these little cartoons with the Lily Chin's descriptions about, you know, proper ways of handling dogs. So I don't know if you can actually see it. I can't zoom in. Oh wait, I can zoom in. No, I can't. Okay, but I mean, that's not important. Those are really freely available. If you look up Lily Chin, Lili, and her last name is Chin, she's got a multitude of free little cartoons about how to behave around dogs and kids. And those things we did, and those are things that I've recommended to people too. But here are some things that I've done differently since becoming a parent. Oh gosh, it's already 3, but and we come to the good part. It's, you know, I learned to consider, it's not, I wrote empathy for everybody, and meaning like empathy for more than just the dog, because I was always thinking about, okay, like how can we make the dog feel better about this stuff? You know, how can we meet the dog's needs better? And, you know, after being a parent, I realized that we have to think about the needs of the kids and the parents too, because even for myself, in my case, I wasn't considering like my own needs or even Griffey's needs. Like I was just like, oh, you know, Griffey, go away, you know, go to the other room, or here's something you can do. But I wasn't thinking, I was thinking more about mama dog. But so, is everybody in the family healthy? You know, you could say that I could have been suffering from some postpartum issue, like many people do, and I probably was. And I want to say that moms it's difficult to speak about those things because it's not normalized. And think about the kids' needs. You know, what are they doing? What are they doing every day? Are their enrichment needs fulfilled? You know, what can the caregivers do? Like, instead of just kind of telling them, oh, here are some exercises to do, like, are they actually able to do these exercises? You know, I know that it sounds like such a simple question, but a lot of these exercises, like, you know, reinforcing sits, like capturing sits, it seems so easy for us, but the other day I was working with Tallulah, and like, I think Tallulah has a 10-year-old young lady with her and the dad, and between all 3 of them, they could not get Tallulah to sit. They couldn't capture the sit, and we had to break it down really small and have the dad pretend to be the dog and leave Tallulah out of it. You know, I didn't think about these things as a pre-parenthood trainer. I didn't think about these things. And I would keep banging my head against the wall, and I would keep training things the same way. And also, from the perspective of looking after the caregivers, are they getting the support that they need? Like, I used to just, meet with people once a week, or if they were really good about doing their homework, then maybe once every 2 weeks. But, some people need to meet every other day. That sounds crazy, but it's true. People need that. They need you to, and it's not just support from you, but do they need outside support too? Do they need, more caregivers involved? It's hard for some people to ask for help. Also, we always say that there are no bad dogs or cats, but, are there bad parents and kids? Nobody says, oh, there's no bad parents or no bad kids. People are quick to blame parents. People are quick to place judgments on their fellow humans. What do you think about that question? Are there bad parents and kids? What does that mean?
Oh, I was muted. I think so. In my perspective, I always say there's no bad kids either, because I work with kids, and to me they're all wonderful. They just have different things going on, even when they're not so wonderful. But I think that that's sort of the same with parents too. Is there are no bad parents, but there are differently equipped parents. They have different things in their toolbox. They have different experiences that have made them who they are, just like kids have had different experiences that make them who they are, and dogs have had different experiences that make them who they are. So I guess if we could give them the right tools, or sort of help to understand them and give them better tools, maybe that's one way to go. But I don't know. As a teacher, there are no bad kids.
Yeah, and there are no bad kids. That's
Yeah.
true. That it's not true. It's easy to say. I think it's easy for us to say. I think a lot of people out there would beg to differ, but it's easy for us to say. And if it's easy for us to say that there aren't bad kids, I think it's harder for people to say that there aren't bad parents. But
Definitely.
when do humans start becoming bad?
Yeah, and it's definitely really easy in my profession to say that there are bad parents because we get the product of them. But after 4 years of working in a low-income school, you start to realize that people just have what they have, and they're getting.
Uh-oh, I can't hear you.
I think she's disappeared.
Yep, something happened to you, Katie.
Yeah.
Maybe you touched your mic.
Maybe Molly's jumped on her or something. I think what I was going to say as well, it's all to do with what's acceptable to individuals. We've talked about, different people have different expectations from their animals. So what I consider acceptable behavior from my dogs and cats, other people would not think it's acceptable behavior, and it's the same for kids and parents. Everybody has different views on what's acceptable and what's not.
Yeah, I think that we do spend a lot of time, each one of us thinking about what's unacceptable for us, and not realizing that there are other perspectives. I also think that we spend a lot of time thinking about that and not thinking about why things are the way they are, and and ways to make things better. So actually that question came to me because as I've over the years read materials from dog trainers, and some very, very famous, very well-respected dog trainers out there. And, I'm talking veterinary behaviorists and applied animal behaviorists. The language is very kind of anti-parent and anti-kid. It's they allowed their kids to do blah, 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 right? I don't know, it could be better in my opinion. Okay, so let's rewind. I know it's a little later than I thought I would be, but let's talk about the case with Griffin and Mama Dog in a different way. So, what are things that I would have done differently? So I talked to Matt briefly about this, and you know what? He kind of said to me that he wouldn't have gotten dogs, he wouldn't have adopted dogs. But he didn't say that, but he was some kids are just blah, blah, blah. But but it's true actually when you think about it. Like I don't obviously regret getting my dogs. I think they're fabulous, and I love having my dogs around when I'm working, and they they help me fill my enrichment needs, and um, now I'm maximizing that more like this post in the post bite era. But here, like when we think about getting a dog, or when people think about getting a dog, they're thinking about whether that dog is a match for them. But what about them? Like, what about the parents and the kids and their situation? Are they a suitable match for that dog or any dog right now? Like, I think that looking back, our situation was probably not the best situation for welcoming somebody new into the family, right? Like, I was like barely, I wasn't able to shower and I wasn't able to cook or do the dishes, and then I'm like gonna provide for a new dog. I mean, that's kind of crazy, but we don't ask people those questions. I mean, I know it's a difficult subject, but maybe kind of getting the feeling for how the parents are doing with their kids is something that's well within our ability, that can be acceptable for adopters. So, if we just ask a little bit about how they're doing with their kids. Um, you know, and I didn't, in the beginning when I was writing it in like a case study format, I didn't, and most people don't like take into consideration, whether the human side of the equation has, needs that are not met. Are they able to shower? Are they, able to meet their enrichment needs? And so one thing that I found really, really worked is making a schedule. And I wanted to share with you my schedule, but so we have a schedule board at home and we write down everything that we do, but it was difficult to read for a normal person. I didn't have time to redo it. It got all smeared. It's on like a chalkboard, but it kind of looks like this. It's most of the ones that when I looked up like family schedule, they were so much more organized than mine, or so much more complicated, and mine is just a list of things like that include brushing your teeth and eating breakfast and showering and things like that, because you need to be reminded that, especially if you're a new parent or if you're an overwhelmed parent, or you've got some kind of difficult situation. And in that schedule, you're going to include that survival stuff, and you're going to include enrichment that involves your kids and your dogs, because kids need that enrichment too, and you can have enrichment activities that can build the bond between the two, but put that into your schedule. And then aside from the schedule for meeting parents' needs, if parents seem to be in a desperate situation, see if they can get help from grandparents or Mother's Day Out services, or I mean, depending on the age of the child, there's a lot out there. It might not all be accessible, but some people who are having difficulty asking for help, might benefit from you encouraging them to seek help. Okay, so management, we talk about managing the dogs, but what about managing the kids? So you can do some exercises to encourage independent playtime for kids. So this is hard. Like basically, whenever Griffey felt unfulfilled, he was gonna, push into me, and I needed to find something else for him to do. So what you can do is, having a little kid area. So you have your kid-free dog area, but the kids really enjoy having their own area, and schedule that in, because kids benefit from your schedule because they know what to expect, right? Like when, I don't know if you've ever seen like an elementary school teacher's room, there's always like this schedule on the board, and the kids know it. Like when Griffey came home from kindergarten, he knew what time everything was. And so when I was having snack time at a different time from school snack time, that was an issue because they kind of internalized that schedule. So that helps because then you're going to know, you're going to know that when you're having a rough time, taking that shower or doing the dishes or whatever, you know that that time is going to be over at a certain time, and then you're going to have your independent playtime, your reading time, your Lego time, whatever, that, because that's on the schedule, and kids are usually pretty good about that. And let your caregivers know that, that it's okay to take turns. So, somebody might be in the role of the kind of the one who deals with the kids all the time, but that doesn't have to be the case. You can, I know families where the dads never ever change a single diaper, for example, and sometimes they have to hear that, hey, one of the caregivers could use a hand. The mom can use a hand. Okay, so let's talk about training. And so there are the classic training exercises that I mentioned before, but there's other stuff that you can do. So there's a website from the Wisconsin Humane Society with a bunch of activities. And what I love about it is that they've sorted them according to age. So this helps you when you're giving people things to do, to give them things that, your toddler can do. So I want to show you. Here are some examples. So for kids 6 months to 2 years, you can do like peekaboo with the pet, like, so you can have your child hide, and that, or like have the, like have the child pull up a cloth and hide, and then let it down so they can expose, they can not be hidden anymore. And you can involve treats there too, because that can sometimes be scary. You can have your child hide with you and then call your pet. And that's great because it involves that following, which is important when dogs are afraid of something. Here from kids 3 to 8, you can have kids toss toys for your pet to get. You can have kids hide on their own or blow bubbles. And for older kids, you can have them handle your dog in an obedience class. You can do agility with your kids and have the kids go through the agility course too, that sort of thing. So these are just things that are different from what you would normally expect trainers to teach kids. And I just never thought about that. I never thought about separating activities based on a child's age or ability. Okay, so this is the part where I could not put the videos on. So let's see if I can. So please pardon me while I try to find the videos. I put them on my Facebook. I hope nobody put anything like X-rated in my messages. So, so here's another really easy activity and important is the consent test. So like I talk to the kids all the time about consent in between the two of the kids, but also regarding the dogs. So here's a video that I did, and you can see baby Perry in the background. And I'm doing a consent test with Mama Dog. Consent test 1. So you guys know how to do consent tests, right? You just, when the dog's close enough for you to pet them, you can go ahead and pet them for just, like 2, 3, at the most 5 seconds at a time. And then you stop, and then you can see what their response is. Consent test 1. So yeah, you can see that she was really into petting. And when we started doing consent tests with Griffey, And she realized that he was able to pet her. A whole new side of their relationship bloomed because, you know, he's really good at following instructions. So I can tell him where to pet her and how to pet her and how long, and he would do that. And so now she'll go up to him for that because he's apparently like a petting expert. Here's another, let's see if I can another activity that you can do, especially when kids get bigger. So here's Harry and Griffey walking our dogs. And so I have a very particular way that I train the kids to walk the dogs. And that is, I have them on a long line. And so I can control what the dog does, but you know, that's just the safety. And they'll reward eye contact. And I mean, both of my dogs are pre-trained, right? That's important to pre-train your dogs before you let your kids walk them. And I'm also like really conscious about, you know, all this time I'm looking around for potential triggers like squirrels and, you know, other dogs, as both of my dogs are recovering reactive dogs. Griffey, I know, can handle mama dog in, he's like a super dog trainer and he can handle her in potential triggering situations. But I just go ahead and grab Fox from Perry. So here you go. Let's see. Okay, I'm coming. There, you get to see it from the beginning. So cute. Okay, I'm coming. She's so good, huh? Great. That makes her a good walking partner. So I don't know if you could hear what he said, but he said, she checks on me so much because he's really annoyed that she keeps looking at him because that means that he has to give her a treat every time. So anyway, he still does it. That's the wonderful thing about Griff is that he's still, you know, he'll do things that, you know, he's not 100% thrilled about. But that makes him, he's a wonderful trainer. I think I have one more thing here. Oh, okay, this was from yesterday. This is probably one of the only things that was shareable in our training session yesterday. And this is Griffey training Fox because mama dog won't come near when Fox is training. So she wouldn't come near that area because the training area, you know, Fox gets priority access to it. And what this is just kind of like, this is family training realness going on. Like Griffey's just kind of training him to do some basic coping behaviors. He's doing sit, down, and touch. He might be doing some name game. Name game's another really great activity for dogs where you just have them say the dog name and then they give them a treat. I think that might be going on here. Let's see. Pet Fox first before you move your hand. Oh yeah, this is the name game. This is actually not too bad. I had a sillier video that probably couldn't get uploaded. Good job ignoring him. Good. I love it. Fox. So next time, say Fox is in with your hand, okay? Or like stay very still, say Fox, then move your hand. Okay? Fox. Good. All right. All right. I had another video, but I guess I couldn't get it on. But I'll post it to our Facebook because it was about like how it was like how training really looks at home with, there's no naked people, but it almost. So basically, that's pretty much the end of the story. I mean, following those recommendations, so I can't say that I would have given a you know an adopter that came to me with this problem of the dog guarding this child who was having difficulties and got this pretty bad bite to the face. Did you guys know Nylon, the little short white dog? It's a similar situation, like Nylon and her and the son had a long-standing, very good relationship. But one day, she was left alone with the son, and the parents, completely trusted her, so no judgment there. And she jumped up onto the table and guarded some broccoli from him or something, and she bit him in the face, pretty bad. I don't think it was necessarily worse than Griffey's bite, but my inclination there is to say like, oh yeah, I can't, I can't expect you to hold on to Nylon, and eventually they did rehome her, because you feel like you would be at fault, if you were a trainer and you gave them any other advice aside from rehoming the dog, then you could be liable, and you would feel pretty terrible too. That would traumatize you. So I can't say that this, I would have given caregivers the exact same advice that I myself followed and I coached my husband to follow. But I can say that having this experience with Griffey and Mama Dog, really changed how I approach these types of consults. Like I'm much more, I think that how I view them is much more from the side of the child and the parents than it ever used to be, and not in terms of like saying no, you can't have any dog or you can't have this particular dog. It's more from like thinking about their well-being and training them, or like I'm looking to help keep them fulfilled and meet their needs. So what do you guys think? Any final thoughts about kids and dogs?
I really like that you take the approach of like building that relationship, just the same way we kind of tell adults who adopt dogs that training builds a relationship. But to really involve the kids, I think, is important.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that I've always done, but it's so different now because because I've been around kids more and I know a little bit more about what kids can do and what parents with kids can do, right? Because that's different. Like, what you can ask people who have to look after these little kids. I mean, how many times have you been in an interview or in a consult with a family with kids, and that the parents are not hearing a single word you're saying because they're like trying to keep the kids from fighting, or they're like embarrassed and they're trying to keep the kids from shouting. I have to always tell people like, I don't hear that, don't worry, I'm like immune to that. Don't be embarrassed,
Right.
Feel free, because as long as nobody's getting hurt, then the priority is getting that conversation in with the parents. But that happens all the time. So what parents can do, even though they're adults, is so different from what adults with no kids can do. I mean, there are some super parents out there that are just like superheroes, but I'm not one of them.
I've learned a lot now, but I mentioned in the chat that I had a little girl, 5-year-old, bitten at my house. So I had a dog and his, owner over, and then another young man and his 5-year-old daughter came over, and I wasn't expecting them. And so he asked me if I could watch her for a few minutes. So I did. And I set her, and I told her to stay away from the dog, but I've never had kids myself. So I set her down on one end of the room, and I put the other owner with his dog on the other opposite side of the room, because it's a big dog as well. It's an Australian Shepherd mix, blue heeler mix. And so they were on opposite sides of the room, and the dog had its owner with them. And they were eating lunch, and I was going to get the little girl some lunch, and I was gone just a second to get her some lunch, and she got bit. And what happened was she went across the room to the dog, despite me telling her not to, and she went to grab some food off of the other guy's plate, and the dog was resource guarding. Now I know that's the term for it. And so he bit her in the face. So it was very traumatic for me and them, because now every time I see her, she's got this scar on her face. And but the parent, so when the parent came back, he was only gone 5 minutes. He comes back and she's, bleeding. He wanted to kill the dog. And so I was wondering, because, well, she's the one who didn't go over there, and then the dog's owner is the one that wasn't watching him. And, so how do you, when people consult on those types of things, what kind of advice do you give them?
Yeah, so it's very different for each case, but I can think of a lot of cases like that where I think that the number one thing, and I didn't mention a lot of things in the presentation, is that, if somebody is there, so a lot of times people don't understand what supervision really is. So when you say supervise, they think, well, I was there.
Yeah.
Or even if they were there, were they looking? And even if they were looking, do they even know what they're seeing? Because a lot of the times in these types of cases, the person who was there didn't see anything.
Right.
They were there for whatever reason. Either they weren't looking or they didn't know what to look for. And so, that's so important.
And that's exactly right, because he just said, I don't know what happened. All of a sudden she was crying.
Right? Yeah, people always say that. All of a sudden there was blood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's also really important, is making sure, just like you would say, if you are a family and you're adopting a dog, and the dog should, know some basic manners. So right away, take them to, manners class. Before you get a dog, or when you get a dog, you should, do your best to be fluent in dog. Especially if you have kids, right? Because how are you going to otherwise know that the dog is not happy with something that the kid's doing?
True. Okay. Well, that was all I wanted to ask.
Yeah, no, sorry about missing the chat stuff. I'm not good at, I don't really understand.
Oh, no, it's fine. I was eating, so I turned off my videos so you couldn't see me. And I was eating, so and my husband had a conference call going, so I couldn't talk out loud. So at the time I was just typing.
Yeah, no, it's me. I need to get better at using Zoom and seeing when people send chats, because I think I saw it, but then I clicked on it and it showed something else from my screen. It was showing like messages from my Facebook. So
well, we're all going to be good at Zoom before long.
Yeah, some of us take longer than others. All right, well, thank you guys for coming. Next week we'll be watching a video. So I'm not quite sure which one it'll be. If you guys are on the IWVC website, or if you're a member and you can see videos that you wanted to see before, let me know and we can show that.
I have a question. Can I do, so I'm fostering a dog right now. Can I do some of these exercises and record them for credit towards getting the BV2?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Why not? There's all kinds of mental enrichment.
Okay. Thank you.
All righty. I'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
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 Bye.